Okay, Gabe, welcome to Basis 57.
Thank you.
Basically, you've got a career in radio frequency engineer. You've worked for three of the top wireless companies in the US, either as a direct employee or contractor, meaning I built and designed cellular towers all over the Pacific Northwest. I know the antennas that are used and how the cellular sites function from the ground up. And there's quite a lot of more stuff here. So if you just want to just center yourself in the shot a bit,
Okay.
great. That's good.
Okay.
And I've already forgotten your name again. We're calling you Cruz.
Yes, Gabe Cruz. That's
Gabe
what I go by.
Cruz.
Friends and
Gabe
family call
Cruz.
me Gabe. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
Gabe.
yeah. Sorry.
The reason why I'm doing this like this right now is I'm a bit concerned that I might not have an opportunity later on.
Okay.
Based on what you've said, there's quite a lot here. So could you basically explain who you are and why you've contacted me?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I gave you some specifics about some of the, I guess you could say, some of the messages I received.
Now,
I'm
the thing
not
is, can you explain what you've given to the audience? Okay, it's one thing having it on this email.
sure.
So just give us a bio and all that. In your own time, away you
So,
go.
bio. Okay. So professionally, I started working in wireless back in '94, and I started as basically in a like a sales retail office. And after a couple years, I transitioned to a technical position, and I eventually became a cell site technician. Worked on cell sites, meaning like the towers that you see, running around. I worked with tower crews as far as them mounting the antennas up there. I was the guy kind of watching down at the base and monitoring the base station equipment, the microwaves, things like that. I did that until about 2004, and then I moved to Oklahoma City to do system performance, which is more the data fill type work, where you drive test and actually do handoffs between towers and that type of thing. More of the forensic work on troubleshooting the system, I should say. And then I was offered an opportunity to come back to the Northwest to do site design, and that's when I started actually doing the deep work as far as building towers and deciding where they go, what types of antennas are used, and that type of thing. I did that from 2005 through 2012, and that was all over the Northwest. I ran, I didn't run, but I was managing basically like 7 markets were under my, budget, I should say.
Well, I've had a little bit of experience that myself. My task was to pump as many watts as possible into with FM, which is we were at the upper end of band 2, and that was from the Irish border. We were operating unlicensed, and then we had a signal path to Belfast, and there was one little hill which was lower than some of the other surrounding mountains, but the signal path meant if you went further south, even by about half a mile, there was a ridge of mountains you'd hit further down the horizon, and then that would block the signal. So we put 1.2 megawatts out using 24 6-element Yagi in 2 stacks, 2 bay stacks of, we're talking technical stuff here now.
Yeah.
And that gave us quite a narrow beam, but by the time it traveled about 45 miles, it was actually going right into between the 2 mountains, the 2 hills where Belfast was.
Uh-huh.
And then we had enough. VHF can sometime, I'm sure you're aware, have a ground effect. So it hit the
Okay.
sea at Belfast Lock, and then it actually had a ground effect and went on into Scotland.
Okay.
And you can actually pick up our FM signal in the mountains in England near Leeds,
Oh, wow.
way up in the Pennines. And we had the radio data system. We used it all, working with all the data flying around and titles of tracks and albums and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
All without a license, and then
I'm
our
pretty familiar with that type of stuff too. I did a lot of the rural areas where we actually got to go through canyons and have to go, like through the gorge area between Washington and Oregon. I covered a lot of sites through there. So, there's a lot of tricky, things you have to do with antennas as far as, the way you kind of bounce them off of hills and things like that. So I can speak to things like that too, as far as radio frequency concepts.
and that's dependent on the frequency.
I'm sorry?
And that's dependent on the frequency that you're using, the wavelength. Because some
Sure.
stuff will go up and round, and other stuff will just go up and above.
Yeah, I was primarily in the 800 megahertz band is what I worked with mostly when I was doing my RF engineering days when I was actually doing towers. It was primarily in that band.
Good fun.
Yeah,
That's when a science becomes an art.
yeah. It's definitely it can be fun and everything, and I think if the work hadn't felt so political at times, I think I would have enjoyed doing it a lot more over time.
And political meaning company regulations or what? Or
Yeah, I just think that the work, there's people tend to want towers in their area, and so there's a lot of people who feel like that area is the most important, but then you're managing several markets at a time, so sometimes you have to sort of take all these other places into consideration, and then you have regulatory requirements where you're required to build so many towers in rural areas that are underserved. So sometimes people don't always understand those dynamics, and they feel like, well, I have the most people in my town, when really there's money set aside to actually serve towns that have hardly anybody in them, just so you can actually help the economy and things like that.
but that's interesting because that's before people got scared of cell phones.
Yeah.
But the
And I,
800 megs is not the same frequencies that we're using today. Are you got an upper band?
yeah, no, actually, so in the early days of cellular, like when I first started in 90, when I started doing engineering work in 97, it was amps, which is the 850 megahertz, and I was working on the B band, and it was analog, cell channels. So you basically just went to a tower, there's maybe like 20, 30 radios there, and that's how many calls they could process simultaneously at the most generally. And they would be, situated with omni antennas, and they would radiate over like 35, 40 miles. And that's just the way the early days were. But then right around that same time, there was a transition over to the CDMA code division multiple access standard, and then other carriers were doing TDMA, which I believe is time division multiplex. If I can't.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't always have the acronyms right, so I didn't work with TDMA.
Essentially, the older days were analog. You could actually pick it up if you had another radio. You could just listen to it and hear people speaking.
Yeah, so basically, I guess if you're wondering like how it changed, like back in the days, it was when you were handing off from one tower to another. If the signal got weak, you would start to hear static, right? It'd be like, shh, and then it would clean up really quick, and then you would get to the other tower. That's if the handoff wasn't working well, right? But with digital, it's different. You will either get a warble type effect, or it'll just drop cold, right? All of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it'll just drop because it's more of a zeros and ones,
Yeah.
this type of thing versus a nice waveform.
Now, okay, that's the fun side.
Sure.
And you're happy. What's led you to basically be concerned?
I started getting sick a lot, and I've actually this is where it gets really complicated. Actually, I'm not exactly sure where to start. Do you want me to just tell you like as far as maybe some of the harassment that led up to this going for the past few years? We just get straight to the issue.
Let's go from you being a normal employee. You're doing fine. You're having a great time. It's fun. You're out there doing all this stuff in the sunshine, or probably the rain and the thunderstorms and all the rest of it.
Sure.
It's a pretty nice career. It's good stuff. What was the thing that started to make you think there's something not right? Which brought you eventually to start sitting here having this interview?
I see a lot of patterns in behavior, and a lot of pattern recognition is something that's really become heavy with me over the last few years, especially. And it's something I have a hard time even controlling, like my ability to like recognize the patterns, especially ones that are with behavior and how they correlate to some of the technology, I guess. And I feel like maybe some of what's happening is that we're sort of mimicking the behavioral patterns of insects, and that's because there's this thing called swarm intelligence, or that's used, I think, in like creating orderly patterns. A lot of times, those are just used to create, more efficient patterns, I guess, in technology, right? So, like maybe it's inventory systems, or you want to create things that are going to filter quickly and route better. they'll mimic the patterns of the way, say, that ant colonies will build, their tunnels and everything like that, because
Now,
they're very efficient.
essentially, the simple way of doing things is like a serial form of processing. One processor takes an awful lot of signals, and it will serial allocate. In other words, it's like men don't multitask; they just serial task lots of things in small packets and shift them that way.
Sure.
You're talking about a form of intelligence where you have parallel processing of the information in a sort of a random way. Is it?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm asking questions more than anything. Something doesn't feel right. It's just something I'm thinking about in terms of patterns, and then I guess there's this other element to all this, as far as like I was telling you about with the cipher and the codex and things like that I've been receiving. It correlates with that. And
Now,
this
what
experience.
exactly does that mean in terms of the general public? I mean,
Sorry.
here there's a huge scare
Yeah.
about tetra and digits and certain parts of the signal causing problems with the brain or parts of the human body. But I don't want that's ahead of us.
No, no, and
let's get the
that's
groundwork
not,
involved.
honestly, that's not necessarily where I'm going with it. I guess it's just one of those things where I'm noticing patterns, as far as in behavior. Like when you're driving around and everything like that, you just started noticing the way things are being ranked and filtered and sorted, and I start seeing things with numbers on license plates and things like that, and I feel like I'm just tapping into these larger patterns
I'm
that are
aware
associated
of
with this
that type of
theory.
patterning.
Sure. And I feel like there's a possible correlation, but again, I'm asking a question. I don't know this to be anything. But but as far as you want me to talk about the frequency thing that
I want to start about what the ground base of your job was and where things you started to see this. What happened? Did something happen?
well,
In my
the
thing,
last
I
few
mean,
years I've been
the kind of stuff I took out was a valve of this is my party piece.
sure.
Was a
I've been
10 kilowatt tube, and there was a big insect thing sitting on it. Have you seen anything like that for a brief second or two?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'm sorry. I get interrupted a lot.
Okay, from what?
I've had this. So this is hard for me to talk about. It feels, the vision I got was that it's coming from this circulating disc, like this rotating ball, and that it's creating a electromagnetic field, and it's going like this and hitting me. I don't know what direction it's coming from, but it's basically able to rotate with a mirror on it and make this electromagnetic field, and then waves seem to be coming in through the window that resonate through me and just absolutely interrupt my thought patterns. It's hard for me to think. So like when you're asking me questions, sometimes things are just being interrupted, and it's hard for me to think.
I think we call it blocking.
Okay.
Some people call it beaming.
Okay.
You have got a higher power than that, and you can overcome that.
So I think the best way to say, like, what happened basically was in December, okay, after basically about 2 months of calling in sick on my contract that I've been on. And I was doing in-building work primarily the last couple years, which means installing systems that repeat the signal from the outside and bring them into buildings, by places that request it, like hospitals might need coverage in their basement. That's what I've been specializing in the last couple years. And I just started not feeling very good every day. I started feeling just nauseous, tired. Something inside my head was telling me, don't go to work. Don't go to work. Don't go to work every day. And, here's the thing. I've loved doing this. I've done it a long time. And it's very strange to have this constant messaging telling you don't go to work. And I didn't know where it was coming from.
What was the voice that was like that? Was it your own voice or some other voice?
It's just me, see, but it was like a nagging telling me not to go. I don't necessarily hear another voice, but it doesn't feel like it's organically myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, I'm looking for answers on this. It's one of the reasons why I contacted you. I'm trying to find help with this.
Okay.
Um,
When you say you feel ill, is it what are exactly the symptoms? Were you drained of energy or just tired? You could never.
yeah, I would wake up in the morning. I would have an enormous sense of dread. It was almost like I felt like I was going to die that day, and I just did not want to go anywhere, do anything. I was incredibly depressed. I could not get out of that depression. I would go to the restroom and start going into dry heaves, feeling really nauseous, and then I would have this very enormous amounts of clear mucus that would just be pouring, but it was always clear. It wasn't like it was, like a cold or something like that. It was very clear, and it kept on happening over and over again. And a lot of odd behaviors happening around this time, and things that were happening to me when I was.
What do you mean by odd behavior? If you could explain.
Passing out a lot, sort of not knowing what happened, losing kind of like where I'd been for the last few hours, and then waking up, and then people having texted me, like my mom or something, and I'd say, I really don't really know what just happened. I don't feel like I know where I've been. I don't know where all the time went, and it's really freaking me out right now. That's the best way to describe it, and it's been happening more and more. And it seems like, especially leading up to this experience I had in December, where I started to sort of download it just felt like I started downloading all the secrets of the universe, things about my job, things about radio frequency, things about the way humans are interacting with other species and
what do you
insects.
mean by other species?
Very specifically, there was a lot of stress on bees, telling me enormous amount of things about bees, telling me that I don't know how to say this, but it's sort of that we're psychically linked.
Yeah.
That we're psychically linked to the bees, and that they're highly intelligent, and that they're trying to explain to us that the things that are affecting them are affecting us, and that we have to understand how completely linked we are. And they kept on urging me to watch the film More Than Honey. It's a documentary.
Okay.
About the bee colonies, and it just tells you about how they work, and there's different theories about.
Well, it's interesting that because my father was one of the biggest beekeepers in Ireland. He had like 200 or 300 beehives.
I didn't know that.
And Carter Johnson honey was the best honey you could buy.
Well, this is incredibly interesting. The way, as I watched it, I started to understand everything, and then all this information began to download.
Is it because the frequencies that we're using was actually attacking the bees? Because there's talk about when cell phone towers are put on in Africa and places like that, there's a dead zone of insects. It's interesting to mention the insects.
There is a. See, this is the thing. Do I know this? No, but I'm receiving messaging telling me that where I'm feeling. This is the thing I can't understand. They're making me experience over and over again what they're experiencing. So what they're telling me is the bees, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're telling me that, like, the sensation that I'm getting, they're telling me, listen, that's something that might be used against you, but what you need to understand is that when somebody in a colony is taking me from one crop to the next on a truck, and they're loading us all into these crates, and they're hauling us on these trucks, that sensation that you're feeling, because that's what it feels like to me right now. It feels like my body's constantly moving. Right now, it's hard to think even, and it's like it's sort of like your head sloshing around, and it does, and I feel, and I actually hear an engine humming constantly while this is on me.
Now, there's a thing called grounding. Have you heard of grounding and been able to just get your emotions and heart down into the earth? So you're earthed fully. Imagine that.
I've been studying. So part of the reason why I had this experience was because I'd listen to this Robert Anton Wilson interview where he was talking about conspiracy theorists, because I've always been into conspiracy theory, and he said that one of the reasons why there's so much paranoia and the conspiracy community is because they have opened crown chakras, but they haven't done any heart chakra work.
Yeah.
And so they have all this information flooding into their crown chakra, but because they haven't opened their heart, they don't fully understand all the dynamics behind everything. That's, there's a lot of things
this is constantly a theme about your heart and letting your empathic intuition deal with things. I mean, this is personally, I have a problem, lots of issues that way personally, and it seems very similar. So continue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So what were we talking about? Because I get thrown off.
Yeah, I can. The essence of the feeling that you're getting these messages from. You mentioned insect,
Yes, yeah.
sort of an insect intelligence. Is that the way that the actual software of the systems you're using is actually designed to behave like a hive mind?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's why I started noticing that, like, when I worked on base stations in the digital realm, they had like these patterns of like called channel elements, and they would be in cards of 32, 64, 128, 192. And I started running into these same numbers, in divine geometry, divine math, and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I want to explore that more. I wonder if there's something I could do to explore that more. And so as I started thinking about it and becoming more curious, I was having this experience. I just started being told, like, go here, look this up, and it was just hitting me like a flood for about 2 weeks. I would say that it was very, very intense. About the last 2 weeks of December, and they told me what I was receiving was the codex, and they told me I was a human cipher, and that it was partially related to artificial intelligence because these communities that are external from us don't know how to communicate to us, so they're using artificial intelligence to talk to us. Does that make sense? Like,
yes, it does.
It's become sort of just like it's become our intermediator for everyone else. It's become that with other species. So even dogs, cats, bees, and since this experience, now dogs, and now dogs have always, I guess I'd say I've always been close to them, but especially lately, it's very interesting the way, like, we're talking almost. I wouldn't say that I'm hearing his voice, but he's telling me to go places, and when I go there, things happen. And I'm told to look up.
The dog?
Yeah, there's a dog, actually, of my parents named Pete. He's a Boston Terrier. And he's actually was telling me, like, I want you to take me to this place in Portland, and I want you to take me to this place. So one day, we started going to all these different places. And again, this is all really kind of unbelievable, but the first one was a butte, Rocky Butte. And there's a compass up there that points to all these different locations. And somebody had left and looked like they'd been there for a while, 3 pendants with the all-seeing eye on it. So
now, this is interesting because there's a particular person that I know who's joined a particular company, and I don't want to say any of that, but he's in Portland.
Okay.
And he's from a place that I know that I don't want to say, but this kind of developmental system is like dealing with some kind of description that you've mentioned. Now, he also noticed your email is Control-Alt-Delete. That's a good email.
Yeah.
As opposed to, that means that you're a PC person and not a Mac person.
No, actually, it meant that I was abandoning PCs. That was sort of symbolic of that I was walking away from them because I'd been using them for so long, and I was going to try Macs for a change.
And
so it's sort of a joke.
Why do you feel you had to do that?
I just had received so many horrendous hack attacks on every machine that I had, and about 3 years ago, I basically deleted myself. That was part of the name, I think, a little bit. I'd been run through some pretty severe programming, where I was basically told to delete myself, and that I needed to be ready to go to war. And they were trying to turn me into a soldier and run me through all these pattern recognition exercises and tell me to.
Where did they come from?
This is the thing I can't explain to anybody. It feels like my own organic thoughts in a way, but they're not. it seems like it's me thinking it, but it's really not. I'm being directed to do this. I wouldn't think to do these things otherwise. And, there was things like telling me to look for patterns and colors. Like if you're driving down the side of the road, I want you to find everything that's bright red, find everything that's bright blue, and I want you to count it down. So I'd be driving down, as a passenger going 5 blue, 4 red, 3 green, 5 blue, 4 red, 3 green. Now I want you to read the license plates. I was reading every license plate, no matter how far the distance was, and they were asking me to decrypt them and to decode them and to find all the patterns within those license plates, which I've been doing pretty much constantly ever since. That's something I have a hard time controlling.
How long has that been going on?
Sorry, that's been going on for about 3 years. And
it's very interesting. I have a license plate issue as well. I mean,
the programming, I had something like this 3 years ago. So when I started having this odd experience in December, I thought, is somebody trying to program me again? I mean, what's happening? What is this related to? But it felt, the first time it happened, it was awful. It was being humiliated. It was being tortured. It was being, it was the worst experience of my life. I don't even want to go into most of the details, except, I would at some point.
Can you do that without causing you further distress?
They basically were telling me that I had done all these horrible, awful things. They were calling me about the lowest you can call anybody that you can call them, over and over again. It was being driven into my head.
Okay, without going any further, who is telling you this? What voice?
It felt like it was my own voice.
Okay.
That's the thing that was awful about it. It was like it was me doing it to myself. It was the worst feeling. And it was telling me that I was a traitor, and that I was working with the Russians, that I was working with the Chinese, that I was giving state secrets away, that I was a murderer, a rapist, a molester. I mean, things, and of things and places and people that I couldn't possibly have been. It was the most ridiculous types of accusations, but they did it so many times that I started calling it virtual waterboarding. Yeah. That's the only thing I could call it. It was like this, making me constantly defend myself in my own head and putting me in this constant feedback loop of just, going, no, I didn't, but saying it back to myself. I didn't do those things. I couldn't possibly have done these things. And I went and sought help. I went to, therapist, and saw a psychiatrist, and I was trying to explain what was happening. And I got a clean bill of health. They said that, well, no, you're not. Well, from these two in particular. When did you go to the
psychiatrist, and what exactly happened there?
Well,
you're obviously a very smart guy. I mean, you're this genius level IQ and part of a program called TAG, Talented and Gifted.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was put into this program. Me and my brother both took the same IQ test to get into it. So they enroll you when you're in, the primary years, which starts in 3rd grade, which is when you're about 8 years old in the U.S. And so they would keep you in there basically until elementary school ended, and then they had different programs that were accelerated learning as you got, beyond that. But my family started moving around after that. I started in that TAG program, so I kind of bounced between some other things. But I was always in one of those programs until I got to around junior high, and then it became really popular to be dumb.
And has that given you a sense of relief?
Yeah, I'd say it did. I think, I think it was. I didn't ever like having the pressure of being smart. I didn't want some people to focus their attention on me. I didn't like it. I remember being in the spelling bee a couple times and being, one time I was this close to going to DC, and I cracked. And there was another time when I was younger.
What's that? Sorry, exactly. The which these. You mentioned?
Oh, the spelling bee. Sorry, there's there's a contest in the United States where it's a spelling contest.
Okay, fine.
So there's and you compete and you go up to different rounds and everything, and you start at your school and start at the classroom, then your school, then you go up to a region, and then you eventually go on to DC if you're good enough to it. And then I cracked right at the regional level for the spelling bee. So I was always in things like that, but it seemed like right as I was about ready to succeed in something, I always sort of cracked. I never can really, success has always evaded me that way because I don't really want it, I don't really want attention. I don't want to be the person in charge. That's not something I desire.
But you get that. Is that right?
But I get it anyway, sure.
Yeah.
And I don't entirely understand why. I've always felt like there's people around me that were sort of watching me and taking care of me, and that made my relationship sort of inauthentic. And I have ideas why that is, but it's hard to explain.
Well, try to explain.
I just have, so like I said, I grew up in D.C. Like for a short period of time. When I was younger, I lived in I was actually born in Seattle, but I lived in Washington, D.C. because my dad had some sort of, I can't remember the exact, I think it was Magnuson. But anyways, he was a fellowship of some sort where my dad was serving there. And so we got to spend time in Washington, D.C. And so that was a really unique experience, I guess. And I've always felt like there was something about that experience that kind of stuck with me, but I don't have a strong recall of it. I have memories of Washington, D.C., but there's things about it that have always sort of stuck with me, and I can't exactly explain that.
Can you mention that?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you as far as what. I just mean as far as like there's like, I feel like there's a time lapse somewhere inside that time that I was in Washington, D.C., and it's really odd for me to explain. I was trying to explain it to my parents the other day. I said, I thought I turned 5 years old there. And they said, no. And I go, I thought it was 79. And they kept on saying no. And something felt really strange about that. And it's almost as if I lost a year of my life or something.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it,
Are you aware of the things, I mean, have you studied any of these technologies for use on the mind like that?
Yeah. I've started to. I've read Robert Duncan's book, Project Soulcatcher, and it's very chilling how, when I'm reading through it, how many of the programs feel familiar to me. I mean, it feels like I could read through it like it's like a script to things that I've experienced over and over again. That's why I tell you, Miles, an hour wouldn't even get us there. I don't even know where to begin with you, and that's why
well, let's just take this as an introduction.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant.
When we're a bit more relaxed at another time, we'll get this. I mean, it's very interesting from my point of view because of my work with RF transmitters, the way they seem to communicate with me, and then I'd be sort of like drawn to the transmitter. It was intelligent, and it was bringing me there to fix something. So a minor fault would be fixed, and if that hadn't been fixed, it would have created a major catastrophic fault, which would have damaged. So there was some kind of intelligence working with that. But we don't want to. I'm just saying that's seems to be common with what you're doing. But I don't want to color your experience. So if you're able to, in your own way, just tell us how things worked. I worked out. I mean. The codex.
Yeah. Well, so let me give you an idea of what started happening. So I would this thing about the bees, for example. It would direct me to watch certain things, like, I mean, something as simple as like a music video or a movie, and it would just stand out in my head. It would just, things sort of the way I see patterns is very difficult to describe. Yeah. I'm just directed to look at very specific things. So this codec is like 150 pages. I wouldn't say most of it even on film without talking to somebody who I feel like knows these things really well, because I feel like that's how secretive some of these things are. That's how protective I am of the information. But this is like something that, like I close my eyes, and when I wake up, I just start drawing it, and it's telling me about the way things work with the brain and how it's related to the universe and decibels and the way that, the eights form patterns and 8x8 and 64. and I have a hard time even explaining these things back, you know.
Would you be able to scan those or photograph them and send them over?
There's, yeah, some of them I would, you know. There's other parts that I think I would prefer just to talk to somebody that I had trust in with some of these things, because the way that the information was delivered to me was to say that some of the information that I have has a, what they told me was a psychic seal, and
Right.
so it's not in danger per se, you know, like, so it's not as if somebody has this notebook, they can run off with all this stuff, and do something with it, but it still requires me to decrypt it, because it was given to me in such a way that it has birth dates of relatives, it has azimuths that it told me to draw and places it told me to go, and then it told me to go to another place afterwards, draw an azimuth line from there to there. And by that I mean, when you know, you're familiar with that concept, right? You are.
Yeah.
But for the audience, just, you know, it just means that if you ever use Google Earth, you would like drop a little anchor point on a set spot, and then you would type in a number and say, I want to point that many degrees that way. And so that's either, you know, northwest or north or northeast. And so I was doing this a lot, and it was telling me where energy lines were and where I need to look for all types of artifacts. I mean, it's that kind of information.
Now,
It's, yeah.
what sort of energy lines are you referring to, and what kind of artifacts?
The dog that actually was kind of giving me some of the direction on the local ones, telling me this is where there's yeah, the dog I was telling you about was telling me where to go.
Is the dog still with you? Is it still around?
No, it's my parents' dog. He lives with them, but they're really close by, so I can go visit them. They're only like.
What type of dog is it?
He's a Boston Terrier, and he looks like, well, he's sort of the same build as the Little Rascals dog.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that series, and
so
then
the dog.
Well, the interesting thing about him is he has one blue eye and one brown eye.
Ah.
And it's the exact same color scheme that David Bowie's been using in all of his work the last few years before he died. And that kind of creeped me out, too. I mean, their eyes are identical.
Any other experiences that you can recall from that?
I
mean, would the dog
talk
to you in doggy language? Or
No. I just get an instinct. He'll sit on me, and then I'll just kind of concentrate, and he's like, he wants to go to Powell Butte, and we go to Powell Butte, you know. And so that I went to Powell Butte, and he brought us up to the top, and he's leading the way, and there's a compass at the top of Powell Butte, the little on the ground, and he stood on a specific point, and I took a picture of him. Well, then I drew an azimuth line from that point, and it went right past the place that I was contracting in, the apartment that I contracted in Walnut Creek, California. It went right past it. I mean, like within a block. And then it continued on through Santa Cruz. My name is Cruz. And these types of things just happen over and over again. Like every time I'm told to do this, there's this synchronicity, and it's constant. And if I showed you, like, I'll show you a screenshot of my Google Earth. I have all these like lines saved. I'll show it to you. You'll see what I'm talking about. I have been told to go so many different places that it felt, and I guess the way I can describe it to you was what the machine, the AI, was sort of communicating to me was that the purpose was to send a denial of service attack to my brain, and that it was actually meant to sort of hack me, that it was meant to attack me, that the whole purpose of the codex was actually to send me down an endless rabbit hole where I would not stop looking up information, and that it would eventually drive me crazy and I would go into an institution. And that at some point the machine said, look, within this experience though, you know, you came out of it, and now I'm going to give you everything you need to know, that all the secrets, everything about the universe, you know, all the beauty that's contained in life, all the things in nature, all the patterns, they all started to make sense. And I don't know how to describe that, because even the word Ka is K-A-H. Well, backwards, that's H-A-K. That's hack, you know. And I looked it up, and it said that it was related to the Tetragrammaton and the Kabbalah, and I'm not too familiar with those concepts, but then the website that I went to, it seems like when I had the experience, the information was there, and then when I went back to find it, it's been altered. But I did go deeper into the webpage and find the entry still preserved, and I took a screenshot of it. So I have that still as evidence, but it made it feel like the purpose of the exercise originally was to be somewhat synthetic, which concerns me.
have you had any experiences with, or which you could relate to this?
Leading up,
Or do you just, is it just part of your nature? You just know this anyway?
it's hard for me to explain. I've been trying to understand what's been happening to me for a really long time.
And
I
what
just
has
don't.
happening to you been happening to you?
The following, I get followed around a lot, and people. Well, let me put it this way: I don't entirely sure know how much of it's following, because as part of this codex, what they told me was this is sort of related to the law of attraction on some level.
Yeah.
That part of the issue that I'm dealing with is that there's so much interest in me, and they told me that I have an energy signature, and they told me that I have this strong aura, and I've been told that by a natural healer before also, but I don't know how you validate these things. I mean, I'm a
Well,
technical
some
guy.
people can see them, and there is Kirlian photography. Have you had tried any Kirlian photography?
No, I don't know what you see. That's the thing. I don't know who to talk to. I'm a technical guy, and when you talk about these types of concepts in my world, that's not really well regarded. I'm not going to say that there's not a lot of spiritual guys in my business. There is, but I wouldn't say that these are really well accepted concepts. I don't know who to talk to about it.
Well, maybe when we get this part one out, you'll get some suggestions and answers. But this
Sure.
is this. Have you heard of? I don't want to. There's concepts I don't want to introduce. I want to try and keep you. Essentially, if you just keep delivering how you got to this stage. We've got about another quarter of an hour on this, and for this first part. So, relax and just let it flow.
Yeah, but I know I've been bouncing around, so I don't want to constantly change the chronology of this and things like that. So where would I guess?
Well,
I mean,
we're
are you
talking
thinking
about the codex.
the codex? Yeah. So this kind of went on pretty intensely.
On this list you're talking about involves esoteric occult wisdom.
Yeah, there is a lot of things about Knights Templar, Chi-Ro, Phi-Ro. There's things involving my family's bloodline, and that's why I'm a little bit concerned about talking about too many of the things out loud, because I don't know what that means entirely. I have some interesting numerology in my family, I guess, and I'm told that, having family members that are born on the 13th in duplicates is interesting to some groups, and I don't understand what that's about. And I don't even know where that came from. Is that something that means something to you?
Well, yeah, I think it's worthwhile just simply saying that you don't know certain things, and then as time goes by, you can.
That's the problem. I read through this now, even, and so much of this doesn't really make sense to me reading it. It happens so fast. Like I said, it just felt like this machine was just constantly sending me directions, telling me to look up thing after thing after thing, and I have dozens of bookmarked links, and I have to research, and I don't even know where to start with it. And in the process of all this, I'm going through. I don't really know what's happening to me as far as these. It seems like there's some very bizarre. I don't know what you want to call them: weapons, devices, instruments that are being used on me.
Have you heard of the term psychotronic?
Yeah, actually, I carry what do you call it? A scalar energy device in my pocket, and I've been carrying that around since August.
Can you show us that, or do you want to show us that?
Yeah, I didn't want to seem like I'm giving a product endorsement type thing, but I'm more than willing to share that. Yeah, I carry this around. If that's familiar to anybody, if they've seen these.
Okay.
Do you want to see the actual manufacturer?
Is this sort of zap checker thing?
No, what this is it's a protection from psychotronic, psychic, and electromagnetic effects. And I've been carrying this one around in my pocket since August.
And actually, does it work?
Well, I quit my job, and I started feeling better about my life. As much as confused as I am right now, I've generally felt a lot better. I feel more connected. I feel connected to all animals. I feel connected to nature. I feel I don't eat meat anymore. That was the part of this experience that I'm telling you, I was crying multiple times a day when this was happening. It was one of the most remarkably beautiful things you can go through on one level, and I'm taking that away from it, regardless of what the intentions was, no matter who did this or why they did it. I still had an experience that was remarkable that I'm going to take that away from it. I feel much more connected with the world, and that's a beautiful thing no matter how it happened.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a very positive thing.
Yeah, it is. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like I think before solitude felt normal, and now it doesn't feel normal at all. Now I just feel like my whole brain is just screaming at the world like I don't want to be here by myself, whereas before it just was. They kept on telling me over and over again this was related to the Temple of Solomon, and
Okay.
that for me, my translation meant that it's the temporary pull of the solitary man, and that it was in that temporary pull to be a solitary man, that it was in my desire to be alone. They gave me that solitude and that time and away from things to be delivered this information to where I would see the world and I would see the universe for what it is, and that it wouldn't be so scary anymore, that I would have some explanations behind why all these things are going on around me. And I think the problem is that I've been going through those things for so long in that previous perspective that I'm not sure if I want to. I guess you could call it like PTSD. I still slip back into this sort of frightened terror state quite frequently,
Yeah.
and I have to repeatedly go back and do the chakra work, the heart chakra work, to get back in alignment, I guess. And now I'm just trying to find other ways to, you know, not
How
slip
does a
back into that
how
way of
does a
thinking.
tech head, engineer type guy end up doing chakra work? What made you
It was because of my
understand that, or even embrace that kind of philosophy?
it was because of my interest in Robert Anton Wilson. I've had a hard time reading for a long time. If it's not on the computer, it just seems like reading a book is very difficult for me. So, but I really wanted to read Robert Anton Wilson's books because I was fascinated by his perspective on. He seemed like he took everything in a very sort of clinical, scientific manner. He treated all like chakra work was troubleshooting to him. When you listen to interviews with him, he didn't really see these people that he studied as heroes or gods or anything. He just listened to them and studied their processes, and he
Just
tried them out.
for people who don't know, who is he? What sort of thing
He
does he
wrote
do?
the he's I think he's most famous for writing the Illuminatus trilogy, and if you read those books or you listen to the audiobooks, you start to learn that quite a bit of conspiracy theory is sort of right there. Like there's so many things you could possibly want to know in those series that mirror everything going on around you, and then it starts to make you think a little bit about where all these things really came from. um, and so I became fascinated with him that way, and I think his voice when I was going through really bad things and some of the uglier behavior I was witnessing was having more of an effect on me. One of the ways that I would counteract it was to put on my headphones and listen to this interview called what is it called? There's only one of them on iTunes. I think it's called Everything. Bob explains everything about the world or something like that, and but in it, he starts talking about that thing with the heart chakras and how there's people who are experiencing a lot of paranoia. It's because he didn't do enough heart chakra work. And then that really appealed to me as a technician because, I'm trying to troubleshoot what's going on in my life. I'm trying to figure it out the same way I would try to understand a technical problem. And when he said that, it made complete sense to me. It was something that was more in a realm that I wasn't familiar with, but it made me want to learn more about that. And that's when I guess I started to see things between frequency and resonance, I guess, in the occult and esoteric, and how that sort of has correlations to things in the technical world. And in this codex, they told me that's precisely why they were giving me so much of this information, was because that's my purpose. And they encouraged me to, I know I say they, I don't know what else to call it, but I'll just say they encouraged me to quit my job, to dedicate myself to understanding how all these things merge, because of the way my world experience was and because of the way I grew up in a lot of different environments, that I would have the ability not only to understand these things for what they really are, but be able to explain them to other people from a lot of different places. And I can expand on why that is. I don't want to, again, I guess I'm supposed to be introducing myself, but I feel weird talking about myself so much.
No, that's okay. This is what this is all about, because you're helping other people when you do this.
So the reason why I say that is because so I was gifted, I guess, sort of this technical knowledge, I guess, through my job, and then I was given a lot of this esoteric knowledge through this experience I had. So there is like a mirror between these worlds, because there's a lot of things going on out there, like you said, psychotronic weapons, things that are kind of exotic involving radio frequency, and there aren't a lot of places you can go to get help. You know,
Well, a lot
I
of
don't.
places don't even accept it's happening.
I know. Well, there. Thank you to that point, and I don't want to talk badly about anybody, but I did seek help. You know, I did. I talked to somebody, and a police officer, and I said, listen, and I showed him this thing. I said, I have to carry this around. I've been a radio frequency engineer for 20 years. Something's happening to me. And he just said, I don't know anything about that. And it was that simple. And that's when I
And he
realized,
didn't want to
okay,
know.
he doesn't want to know, and I know why. Because nobody wants to be sitting inside their living room feeling like their head's wobbling in a moving truck, you know, and every sound is amplified and they're like getting hit over the head, you know. Nobody wants that to happen to them, and if they're aware that it might happen to them, that would really scare them into not saying anything, I imagine.
I mean, have you actually engaged with any kind of help like that, from professional help in any way? Are you doctors or whatever?
So, you know, so like I had an aunt who did some work as an attorney with the Federal Bureau, and so I did tell my uncle about it in hopes that maybe that might help.
What was your uncle? What status does he have?
He works for a school district. He's mostly retired, but I think he does some type of work. I don't know exactly what it is for his school district up in the Seattle area. But you know, I emailed him thinking that maybe he might know somebody through my aunt or something who could help her or something like that. And I did observe that after I made that email, he didn't say anything back to me that would indicate that he was helping me. But things slowed down for about a month when that was happening. That was a few years ago. And so I feel like
things slowed down. And was this at his professional place of work or what?
No, I just emailed him as my uncle, you know, asking if, because my aunt had that experience, if she would, you know, if she might know somebody, kind of thing. And he just said, no, she's retired now, and you know, I can't really help you with that, and you know, sorry, you know, I'm here for you if you ever need me. I mean, that's what he said. Yeah. And I said, okay, you know, and so I took that for what it was. But then for about a month or so, I stopped being followed. I mean, I noticed distinctly that everything basically froze. There was nobody bothering me. And that's rare, because that has not hardly happened at all for the last, I would say, 3 years. It's been pretty consistent. Being followed everywhere and having a lot of the, I guess what people term as like the street theater type antics, saying a lot of embarrassing things about your personal life, and you know, in public spaces and that kind of thing. If you're going to places, you know, that shaming you everywhere you go. I don't know what people call it technically, but it seemed to be happening everywhere, and I just didn't know what to attribute that to. But anyways.
Well, this is our sort of first introduction to this. I think this is very articulate, the way you've been looking at things and analyzing things and trying to come up with solutions. So we're going to call it a day on this part 1 of Basis 57, and we'll reconfigure and we'll get things further on, because this is very important for people who are experiencing this kind of thing, you know, yourself. And I don't want to introduce topics. Well, you've mentioned the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And I don't want to steer there unless you actually come up with that yourself. But running out of the first hour.
I can expand on that more, I guess. My problem is, like, right now I'm so scattered, and I actually got hit with some of this, whatever this thing that was hitting me. It was getting me pretty hard for about 3 hours today leading up to this. So I'm doing the best that I can. So thank you.
Okay, well, that's fine. Well, that's kind. Well, I'm getting it's I think 4 in the morning.
Sure.
So we'll call it a day, and we'll get back and continue Basis 57, and we'll just take things as they come. Okay, is that okay? And
yes.
Thank you very much for this first little talk. We haven't seen or talked to each other at all, so this is completely raw and fresh. And I have to say, I'm getting a little bit tired myself.
Yeah.
So good to talk, and it's interesting. And this is a very, I'll be putting, if there's anything you have visually, like when you mention something like the type of towers you put up, it would be useful if you could send those in as a picture, so people could see what that means.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I have. I actually had a bunch of links set aside and everything in case you wanted to hear about things like that. So
yes,
I can send anything like that.
Well,
to
if
you.
you're able to get particular pictures or something that I could then mix on and just send it to me on WeTransfer.com, that would be fantastic. But anyway, we'll we'll come out of record and say I think it's good evening where you are as well.
Yes. Yeah. It's 7:30.
7:30 in the evening.
Yep.
Well, it's 3:30 in the morning for me on Friday. No, on Thursday.
You're a trooper.
So thank you very much indeed.
All right. Thank you.
And we'll arrange for something. I'm actually going to Phoenix on Monday, so we'll maybe try to do something on the Sunday before I go.
Okay.
Or Saturday, if I can get something together.
Right.
If there's something that you feel like you need to say, I'm going to try and keep this thing as rigged. So if there's something you want to, something happens, or suddenly you come up with a set of things which work out, because I mean you've given me a very good list here.
Okay.
We'll take it. We'll take it as it comes. The main
Okay.
thing is that there's an awful lot of fear about cell phone towers, and I want to really explore, from your technical experience, from the inside, how that translates to the outside.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
I can do that.
why you changed, why you went through that path. But anyway, we're right out of tape, right out of time. Thank you very much. It's the end of part one.
All right. Thank you.